So as we open up the book of Psalms this evening, like I said, the theme we'll be focusing on is Christ's kingship. Kingship of Christ within the Psalms is not a tertiary theme throughout the Psalms, nor just a secondary theme. If you read through the Psalms, you'll see it's primary. You can't go a couple chapters without seeing this kingship of Christ presented over and over and over again. So we'll be spending our time tonight in the Psalms throughout the course of the evening, but before we get there into the Psalms, I just want to lay a foundation for what we're going to be seeing in the Psalms. And first, we need to understand that the kingship of Christ is rooted in the gospel. Now, that might seem like it's a strange thing to say. Why do I say this? Because instantly what comes to mind when we think of the gospel, what do we think of? The death, burial, the resurrection of Christ, as we should, because those are key components in the gospel, and they're central to the gospel. But those are not the whole gospel. The gospel message is not only the message of personal salvation through the death and resurrection of Christ, it's much more. Christ called the gospel message, when he entered the scene, he said, it's the gospel of the kingdom. The announcement of God's King, Jesus Christ, had arrived to bring salvation through the cross and establish his rule. So what's so often neglected in our understanding of the gospel is the subsequent ascension and enthronement of Christ. How many people know what yesterday was? What's celebrated yesterday? Raise your hands high. Does anybody know that Ascension Day was yesterday? How many people know this? So Ascension Day is 40 days after we celebrate the resurrection of Christ. I didn't even know this until the past few years because it's neglected. 40 days after Christ rose from the dead, we should celebrate his ascension, which was yesterday. And it's fitting that we didn't plan this. The theme is Christ's kingship the day after Ascension Day. It's 40 days after we celebrate the resurrection of Christ and the day he ascended into heaven. Just before Jesus left the earth in his ascension, he announced in the Great Commission, all authority in heaven and on earth had been given to him. And it's on this authority that he sent us out in the Great Commission. He said, therefore, or on this authority, go. It's all authority in heaven and earth had been given to him, and therefore on this authority, go. Jesus was then raised to heaven in a cloud and was taken from their sight. But that's where the synoptics end, and we see this account in the beginning of Acts. But God gave us a prophetic view from heaven in Daniel chapter 7, chapter 13 and 14 of the ascension. So picture this from God's view from heaven as Christ is raised from the dead. And he appears to 500 witnesses, he gathers his disciples, and he's lifted up in the clouds. So that's the scene we're left with. Now from the throne room, Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 through 14 reads, this is Daniel writing, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming, and he came up to the Ancient of Days, and he came near before him, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every tongue might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not be taken away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. So what we see is Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, entered heaven upon his ascension. He approached God the Father, the Ancient of Days, and he was given dominion, shaltan, which actually means literally a powerful reign, glory, and a kingdom. And to what end does the scriptures tell us that he did this? That all peoples, nations, and men of every tongue might serve him. His dominion is everlasting and will not be destroyed. This was given to him at his ascension and enthronement, and it's as much a part of the gospel as the rest. The kingship of Christ, as we'll see moving forward, is so gloriously presented throughout the Psalms. And we're not going to do an exhaustive study as we look through the Psalms this evening. But our prayer is that as you leave this place, you'll have a more elevated view of our King, who rules not only over our hearts, but over all nations and all rulers. His rule is forever, and his dominion is sure. So keep that in mind as we sing praise to our glorious King, for he alone is worthy.